She could not have been older than 8. And she had no reason to speak to him. No invitation. No introduction. No adult standing beside her with permission granted. She simply appeared at the edge of the light, where the parking lot ended and the darkness began, and she said the one thing no one else in that entire gala crowd was brave enough to say. "Your driver is lying." 4 words. Barely louder than the fountain humming somewhere behind them. Marcus Bennett did not move for a full 3 seconds. He stood beside his black SUV with one hand still resting on the door handle, the sounds of the charity gala dissolving behind him into laughter and string music and the clink of crystal glasses. Atlanta was warm that night. Golden lights draped across the venue entrance. Everything around him felt precisely ordered, controlled, predictable. Then he turned and saw her. A small black girl, maybe 7 or 8, standing near the edge of the parking lot beneath a single lamppost. Her dark curls were pulled into 2 uneven puffs. Her sneakers were worn, the kind that had covered serious mouths. She held a faded blue bracelet against her chest with both hands, fingers wrapped tight around it like it was the only anchor she had. She was not asking for money. She was not crying. She was not trying to get his attention anymore. She had already done the hard part. She had already said what she came to say. Marcus looked around. Guests moved past in gowns and suits, none of them noticing the girl. Balas crossed the lot in both directions. Nobody claimed her. Nobody looked for her. He looked back. "What did you say?" he asked. The girl hesitated. For one moment, he thought she might bolt. Instead, she looked down at the bracelet in her hands, then back up at him, slowly. "Your driver is lying," she repeated. Quieter this time. More certain. Marcus blinked. The statement made no sense at all. Daniel Ross had worked for him for nearly 6 years. Reliable, professional, insaciable. He knew Marcus's schedule better than most executives. He had driven him through storms and crises and red-eye returns without a single incident. There was no reason in the world to question him. "Why would you say that?" Marcus asked. The girl opened her mouth. Closed it. Searched for the right words the way only someone carrying too much truth can. Her gaze drifted toward the SUV beside him. Her expression changed. Not fear. Not drama. Something quieter, and worse. Genuine concern. "Because he told you something that isn't true," she whispered. Marcus glanced toward the entrance where Daniel stood talking with a valet near the curb. Relaxed. Smiling. Perfectly normal. Nothing about his posture suggested guilt. Nothing about his face suggested anything at all. "Do you know him?" Marcus asked. The girl shook her head. "No, sir." "Then how do you know he's lying?" She paused again. A breeze swept through the lot. The fountain kept its rhythm. Somewhere inside the gala, a pianist moved into a new song. And yet the air out here suddenly felt heavier than it had a minute ago. The girl swallowed. She lowered her voice even further. "I saw something." Marcus studied her face carefully. Children misread things. They overhear half a conversation and fill in the rest. They connect dots that were never meant to be connected. He knew this. But there was something unusual about her. She wasn't performing. She wasn't dramatizing. She wasn't trying to convince him of anything. She simply looked burdened, the way someone looks when they know something they didn't ask to know, and they can't make it go away. Before he could ask her anything else, a voice called out from across the lot. "Mr. Bennett?" Daniel. Walking toward him with the car keys and his usual easy smile. Marcus looked toward him. Then back toward the girl. But she was already stepping backward, dissolving into the shadows beyond the reach of the lamp. "Wait," Marcus said. "What did you see?" She stopped for only a second. Her fingers tightened around the bracelet. Then her eyes moved deliberately to the underside of the SUV. One look. Intentional. Specific. Check the car, she whispered. And then she was gone. Marcus stood beside the SUV long after the darkness had swallowed her. The parking lot felt larger now. Quieter, despite the music still floating from the ballroom behind him. Daniel approached. With the same calm he always carried, opened the rear door, asked if everything was all right. Marcus forced a small nod. Just tired, he said. He got in, the door closed. The drive began. Downtown Atlanta moved past the windows in streams of red and amber, familiar and steady. Daniel spoke about tomorrow's schedule. Investors. A Dallas flight. A charity breakfast. Al routine. Al perfectly professional. Marcus listened. But what he kept seeing was the girl's face. Not frightened. Not desperate. Concerned. That night at the estate, he could not sleep. He poured a glass of sparkling water. Stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the dark grounds stretch toward the tree line. An hour passed. Then, almost without deciding to, he opened the security camera app connected to the property system. He told himself he was looking for reassurance. He found something else. The footage from earlier that evening showed the SUV arriving before the gala. Normal. Routine. Then Daniel stepped from the driver's seat and glanced over his shoulder, checking the lot in both directions. Satisfied no one was watching, he walked to the side of the vehicle and crouched behind the rear wheel. Only a few seconds. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and continued as if nothing had happened. Marcus played it back. Then again. The image quality wasn't sharp enough to show what Daniel had been doing down there. Maybe nothing. Maybe maintenance. Maybe a routine check he'd simply never noticed before. But the girl's voice came back the moment he tried to reason it away. Check the car. Marcus set down his glass. His heartbeat slowed into something colder. Something more deliberate. Outside, beyond the dark windows, the estate lights reflected in long ribbons across the polished driveway. And for the first time that night, Marcus began to wonder if the little girl in the parking lot had been trying to warn him about something much larger than a simple lie. He slept less than 2 hours. By sunrise, the security footage was still running on a loop in his mind. He stepped outside with his coffee while the estate was still washed in pale early light. Birds moved between the oak trees. Everything looked clean and ordinary. Daniel arrived exactly on schedule. Good morning, sir. Flight leaves in 3 hours. We have plenty of time. Marcus looked at him for a moment. Before we leave, I want the vehicle inspected. Something shifted behind Daniel's eyes. Gone in an instant. Of course. But it was serviced just last week. Humor me. 20 minutes later, the SUV sat inside the private garage under fluorescent lights. 2 mechanics worked through it systematically. Tires. Engine. Brakes. Electronics. Daniel stood nearby with his hands folded, expression neutral. Marcus almost talked himself out of being there. Then one of the mechanics frowned and said, Mr. Bennett? He reached carefully behind a protective panel beneath the rear section and pulled out a small rectangular object, no larger than a deck of cards. Teeny indicator lights blinked faintly beneath a layer of dust. Definitely not factory equipment, the mechanic said, turning it in his hands. Looks like a tracking device. The ventilation fans suddenly seemed very loud. Marcus felt his stomach drop. How long has it been there? Hard to say. But someone installed it deliberately. They knew exactly where to put it. Marcus turned toward Daniel. The driver looked genuinely shocked. That is impossible. I have never seen that before in my life. 6 years of trust does not disappear in a single morning. Marcus wanted to believe him. But the mechanic placed the device on the workbench under the overhead light and one of the small indicators blinked green, then blinked again, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere, someone had been tracking his every move. And the warning from a little girl at the edge of a parking lot no longer sounded like a child's confusion. It sounded terrifyingly precise. The jet departed nearly an hour behind schedule. Marcus sat by the window, watching the clouds. The device was sealed in an evidence bag on the table across from him. His attorneys had been notified. A cybersecurity consultant was already examining the hardware. The machinery of response was moving. But none of it answered the one question that wouldn't let him alone. Who had put it there? Daniel reviewed travel documents with his usual composed focus, 3 rows back. If he was nervous, he had been hiding it for 6 years and wasn't about to stop now. Late in the afternoon, the cybersecurity consultant called. The device was active, the man said. Someone was receiving live location data. Can you identify who? Marcus asked. Not yet. But there's something else. It was installed very recently. Based on the battery and wear pattern, within the last week. Marcus looked through the glass wall of the Dallas conference room toward Daniel, who was speaking with one of the assistants near the door. 1 week. That evening, back in his hotel room, the city spread out 40 floors below him in ribbons of light. He loosened his tie and opened a new file. Security footage from the gala venue. Every available angle. He found her almost immediately. A small girl crossing the edge of the parking lot. 2 puffed curls. Worn sneakers. She paused beside a decorative hedge, looking toward the SUV. Then she turned toward someone standing nearby. The figure was half in shadow. No face visible. But one detail was unmistakable. The person handed her something. Marcus froze the frame. In Eva's hand, in the pixelated stillness of that frame, was the faded blue bracelet. The same one she had been clutching when she warned him. His heartbeat slowed. The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Who gave her that bracelet? Why had she been watching his car? And how had a child of 8 known about a secret that even he had not discovered until the next morning? Marcus cancelled his return flight. The meetings could wait. These could not. Before the sunrise he was reviewing the gala footage again, frame by frame. The unknown figure who had handed Eva the bracelet vanished from every camera angle before revealing a face. Whoever it was had known exactly where the lenses pointed. By 8 o'clock he was on a private flight back to Atlanta. Daniel sat forward in the cabin reviewing emails, calm as always. Though calm, Marcus was beginning to think. Not suspicious calm. Practiced calm. The kind that belongs to someone who has made peace with a decision they can't take back. On landing. Marcus gave one instruction to his security team. Find the girl. Hours passed. No one in the gala records matched her description. No one in the crowd photographs. No nearby business had footage of her that night. It was as if she had materialized out of nothing, delivered her warning, and dissolved back into the dark. Late afternoon, Marcus returned to the charity venue on instinct. The ballroom was being dismantled. Workers moved between rolling carts and folded tables. The energy of gala night had been replaced by the quiet industry of cleanup. He walked to the lamppost where she had stood. And there it was. Partly hidden beneath a cluster of decorative flowers near the base of the pole. A flash of faded blue. Marcus crouched down. Picked it up carefully. The bracelet was worn, frayed, clearly old. One side had been repaired by hand. It had the look of something loved for a long time, something that mattered. He turned it over. On the inside, in faded silver ink, were 3 words. Willow Creek Shelter. His security team found the address within minutes. West side of the city. 12 miles away. Marcus was already walking toward his car when his phone vibrated. A new message from the cybersecurity consultant. He read the first line and stopped moving. The tracking signal had been transmitted directly to an account connected to Bennett Global Holdings. His own company. The shelter occupied a modest brick building between a church and a community garden. Children played basketball in a fenced yard. Volunteers moved supplies through a propped-open front door. It was the opposite of everything Marcus's world usually looked like. He stepped inside. Warm lights. Crayon drawings taped to the walls. A receptionist looked up. Marcus placed the bracelet on the counter. "I'm looking for a girl named Eva." The woman's expression immediately softened. "Eva Brooks?" "Yes. She's here almost every afternoon after school. But not today." Before Marcus could respond, a voice came from behind him. "Older. Mature. You're the man from the parking lot." An elderly volunteer stood beside a shelf of donated books, watching him with quiet recognition. "Eva told us about you," she said. Marcus blinked. "She did. She said you'd probably come looking for her." The woman reached into a drawer and removed a folded piece of paper. "She left this yesterday." Marcus unfolded it carefully. An address. And beneath it, one sentence in neat handwriting. "If he comes, tell him to check who approves the executive travel schedules." He stared at those words for a long time. Executive travel schedules. The same schedules Daniel handled every week. The same routes the tracker had been recording. Outside the shelter windows, the sun was pulling low, stretching long gold shadows across the parking lot. For the first time since the gala, Marcus felt close. A half hour later he stood on a quiet residential street at the address from Eva's note. Porch lights were flickering on as evening settled. A basketball rolled slowly across a driveway nearby. A dog barked somewhere down the block. He knocked. The door opened. Ava stood there holding a library book against her chest, eyes wide for just a moment. Then she stepped back. "Come. You found the note," she said. It wasn't a question. "You expected me to," Marcus said. She let him in. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. Family photographs covered nearly every wall. An elderly woman sat knitting in a corner chair, greeted Marcus warmly, and quietly excused herself to the kitchen. Marcus and Eva sat across from each other at the dining table. He placed the bracelet between them. Ava looked at it and smiled softly. "I was looking for that." "You left it on purpose," Marcus said. She looked down. "Maybe." "Ava." He leaned forward. "How did you know about the tracking device?" The room went quiet. Crickets had started outside in the cooling evening air. Ava traced a finger along the edge of the bracelet for a moment before answering. "Because I heard them talking." Marcus kept his voice even. "Who?" "The driver." A pause. "And a lady." "What lady?" She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Slid it across the table. Inside was a printed photograph from a company newsletter. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. The woman smiling in the photograph beside him was Victoria. "Ah yes. Senior Executive. Head of Corporate Operations." Someone he had trusted with more institutional knowledge than almost anyone else in the company. "You know her?" Ava asked. "Yes." Ava nodded, slow. "That's the woman." Marcus set the photo down. "You're certain?" "I was sitting behind the flower boxes before the gala started. Reading. They didn't see me." Her voice remained completely level. "I heard your name. He heard something about travel schedules. And I heard the lady say that everything depended on you following your usual route." The room contracted around that sentence. Marcus sat with it for a moment. Travel schedules. Usual routes. A tracker transmitting data back to his own company's servers. Victoria Hayes with access to executive systems, executive decisions, executive information. They never said the thing that made his blood go cold. "There's one more thing." He waited. She looked directly at him for the first time since he'd sat down. The lady told him that if anyone started asking questions, they should blame someone else inside the company. "Ah, Pete. I think they already knew you'd find the tracker." Marcus drove back to the estate in silence. Inside his private office, with a storm gathering on the horizon, he spent 2 hours searching through travel approvals, expense reports, internal communications, archived schedules. Spotless. I love it. Victoria's records. Daniel's employment history. Nothing out of place. That was the thing about a very good deception. It doesn't look like anything. Then the cybersecurity consultant called again. "We found a data log from the tracking device," he said. "Thousands of entries. Coordinates, dates, routes. At first it looks like noise. But there's a pattern." Marcus leaned forward. "What pattern?" "Every tracked route corresponds to a major negotiation, acquisition, or investor meeting. Someone wasn't monitoring you personally. They were monitoring your business moves. Opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars." The storm reached the window. Rain began tapping softly against the glass. Marcus stared at the screen. 3 weeks earlier, the tracker had transmitted data from a trip that had never appeared on any official schedule. A route only 3 people had known about. Himself, Daniel, and Victoria. Before he could process it fully, his phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. A photograph. Ava, standing near the charity center. Back in the night of the gala. And below it, a single sentence. "Stop asking questions about the girl." Marcus did not stop. The next morning he was at Bennett Global headquarters before sunrise. 60 floors of polished marble and glass, nearly empty. He went directly to the technology division and met Rebecca Collins in a secure conference room. She had run internal systems audits for years. She noticed things. He gave her the cybersecurity reports. She spent 45 minutes in silence. Then she looked up. "There's a permissions bridge," she said. "Someone built an invisible pathway between departments. Information could move without triggering any standard alert. Only a handful of people could have built something like that." She highlighted the list of names. Victoria Hayes was on it. Daniel Ross was not. The direction of suspicion had just shifted. Rebecca kept digging. Files were being deleted. She recovered some. Inside a recovered folder, archived communications, travel schedules, meeting locations. And a scanned page from a notebook. Handwriting Marcus recognized immediately. Victoria Hayes. One sentence, underlined. "Keep the driver informed, but do not tell him everything." The room felt colder. Before Marcus could reach for his phone, Rebecca's monitor flashed with a new security alert. An external user had just logged into the system using Victoria Hayes' credentials. The problem was, Victoria was currently in a board meeting 3 floors above them. Someone else was using her access. Right now. Inside the building. Marcus and Rebecca tracked the connection to a vacant office suite on the 42nd floor. An unfinished floor. Renovation barriers lining the halls. Plastic sheeting over walls. Nobody was supposed to be up there. Marcus took the elevator alone. The hallway was silent. The air tasted like dust and dry plaster. At the end of the corridor, a door stood slightly open. He pushed it. Empty. A folding table in the center of the room. On top of it, a laptop. Still active, files flashing across the screen before disappearing. Someone had left only moments before. Marcus called Rebecca. She had already found another account connected to the activity. "It belongs to a former employee," she said. "Who?" A pause. Thomas Granger. The name landed like a blow. Thomas Granger had served as chief strategy officer before leaving the company 2 years ago publicly. The departure had been described as mutual. Privately, Thomas had been furious, passed over for a promotion that had gone to Victoria Hayes. Marcus opened a folder on the abandoned laptop. Reports. Financial projections. Travel records. And one video file, dated the week before the gala. A pressed play. Poor quality. 2 voices. One belonged to Victoria. The other belonged to Thomas Granger. They discussed travel routes, executive schedules, confidential meetings. Then a sentence rose from the audio that made Marcus's jaw tighten. The driver only knows part of the plan, Victoria said. As long as he believes he's helping with logistics, he'll never ask questions. Marcus stopped the video. Daniel hadn't been the mastermind. He had been a piece on someone else's board. Kept close enough to be useful. Kept ignorant enough to be controlled. Then his phone vibrated. A message. From Abba. 6 words. They know you found the office. He called her immediately. You need to leave, she said, before he could speak. How did you know where I was? Because they're watching the same building cameras I am, she said. The volunteer at the shelter taught me how to use the public access feeds. When I saw people on the 42nd floor, I knew you'd found something. Marcus looked toward the hallway. Quiet. Empty. But not necessarily safe. Abba, tell me everything you remember. She told him. Some of it was fragmented, the way a child's memory always is. But one detail cut through everything else clearly. They kept talking about a board vote, she said. The men said everything would change after the vote. Beneath Global's board was scheduled to vote on a major expansion project in less than 48 hours. The project would determine control of several divisions worth billions. Suddenly the whole architecture of the scheme came into focus. Tracking devices. Stolen travel data. Intelligence gathered before every major decision. Someone had been building an advantage, positioning themselves to control the outcome before the vote was even cast. Rebecca called at that moment and merged into the line. Financial transfers, she said. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. Thomas Granger has received millions over the last 18 months. A pause. And several approvals were made using authority codes belonging to board members. These had never been 2 people. It had gone much deeper. Ava's voice came through the line quietly. That's what they were worried about. A bit of silence fell across the call. She had reached the same conclusion at the same moment. On the abandoned laptop screen, a calendar reminder had just appeared. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock in the evening. Private meeting. 3 words in the location field. Lakewood Executive Hangar. Marcus watched from several hundred feet away as the hangar filled. Rebecca monitored communications from a nearby vehicle. Investigators documented every arrival. Marcus checked his watch. 7:58. Black sedans rolled through the entrance one after another. Executives. Senior advisors. Board adjacent figures. People with proximity to the vote, to the information, to the power that had been quietly moving in the wrong direction for 18 months. Through a discreet camera feed, Marcus watched the meeting begin. Victoria entered with a folder. Thomas Granger appeared from a side entrance. Documents were distributed around the table. He listened through the audio feed. At first, it sounded almost reasonable. Market forecasts. Partnership strategies. Investment opportunities. Then the tone shifted. Once the vote passes, Thomas said, the transition becomes permanent. Someone asked about Marcus. Thomas smiled faintly. He only knows a fraction of what happened. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Confidential acquisitions. Negotiations. Board-level decisions. All of it had been compromised. Then Victoria finally spoke. And the driver? The room went still. Thomas shrugged. He served his purpose. And then, the door opened unexpectedly. Daniel Ross stepped inside. Several people looked startled. Thomas looked annoyed. Victoria looked afraid. Daniel set a folder on the table without a word. "You told me we were helping with logistics," he said, steady and quiet. "You never mentioned any of this." I opened the folder. Inside were copies of messages, schedules, financial records. Collected carefully. Over time. By a man who had grown suspicious of the people using him and had decided to do something about it. Thomas' expression disappeared. Victoria looked at the floor. Marcus stared at the feed in disbelief. The driver had been running his own investigation. "I kept records," Daniel said. "Just in case." Investigators moved in moments later. No chaos. No confrontation. No raised voices. Just the quiet, final sound of a long deception folding in on itself. The recovered archive contained one more file. Marcus opened it just after midnight in a quiet conference room while Rebecca watched the screen. It was an internal report prepared months before the gala, commissioned by Thomas Granger, containing surveillance photographs of the charity center. One attachment showed the parking lot with a small circle drawn around a location near the flower boxes. A separate message referenced a concern about witnesses. A private investigator's report listed names of people who frequently visited the area. One of those names was Ava Brooks. Marcus felt the breath leave his body slowly. Ava had never been part of the scheme. She had simply been there, the way she always was, because the shelter was her world. She happened to be sitting behind the flower boxes when two people had a conversation they believed no one could hear. A child had stumbled into a secret that experienced executives had spent millions of dollars protecting. The following afternoon, Marcus drove to Willow Creek Shelter with a small box under his arm. Children were playing basketball in the fenced yard. Volunteers moved through the entrance carrying supplies. Everything at the shelter moved at a pace that had nothing to do with corporate floors or boardrooms. Ava was sitting beneath a tree reading when she looked up and saw him coming. "Did you find the truth?" she asked. Marcus sat down beside her. "Because of you, we did." She looked down, shy for the first time. I handed her the box. Inside, carefully framed behind glass, was the faded blue bracelet. Repair. Protective. Sit on a small velvet backing. Below it, a silver plaque. It read, "Courage changes everything." Ava stared at it for a long moment. "You fixed it," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "Some things are worth protecting," he said. Weeks later, Bennett Global announced major reforms. New oversight policies. Leadership changes. The board vote proceeded with full transparency. Daniel remained with the company. Investigators confirmed that somewhere along the way, he had stopped being a participant and become a witness. He had gathered evidence quietly, the way a man does when he realizes too late that he has been used, and decides the only way forward is the truth. Victoria Hayes and Thomas Granger disappeared from the public record the way people do when institutions stop protecting them. But one story refused to fade. At the entrance of Bennett Global headquarters, a scholarship display now greeted every visitor. Dedicated to students who demonstrated integrity and courage. At its center, a photograph of a girl holding a repaired blue bracelet, smiling with the particular confidence of someone who knows she did the right thing. Every year, dozens of children received opportunities through the program that carried her name. One evening, months after everything had resolved, Marcus stood in the lobby watching the last of the day's employees file out. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, painting long gold rectangles across the floor. Nearby, the framed bracelet rested beneath its small spotlight. He thought about a parking lot in Atlanta. A warm evening. A fountain somewhere nearby. And a voice smaller than the music, quieter than the crowd, carrying more weight than any headline or boardroom ultimatum he had ever faced. 4 words. "Your driver is lying." He smiled to himself. Sometimes the loudest truths do not arrive. From power. They don't arrive from money or position or the kind of authority people spend their entire lives building. Sometimes they arrive as a whisper. From a little girl brave enough to speak when no one else in the room will.